always have been suspicious that Ntutuko has something to do with Tshego's death. It's still early days. We are still waiting for the government for the law, for everyone involved in this to apprehend the right people for this.
The alleged mastermind in the Tshegofatso Pule murder case, Ntutuko Shoba, denied knowing the identity of the driver of the jeep that picked up Pule from his complex on the night of her murder. This despite the fact that the 28-year-old's convicted killer, Muzgaise Malepane, told the court the pickup was arranged during their meeting earlier that day. So, obviously, there were big questions around, whether or not these people knew each other, what the agreement, if there was an agreement, what that was, whether Tshegofatso knew Muzgaise, and whether he was paid this money that we hear of, this money that he also spoke about in his plea bargain. Convicted killer says he did not immediately ask for the 70,000 rand fee allegedly agreed on because he knew that Shoba was afraid of him and that he would blackmail him. And he starts obviously by detailing his relationship with Ntutuko, saying that in fact they've known each other for about 10 years. And that they went to the same school, going into details around, how he was surprised when for the first time in May, Ntutuko came to him, he called him, he had gotten his number, called him and came to his house. This is where now he reveals that the plot was revealed.
Manje labantu laba bayamchomela abaserenkeni. That's why agcine azakini. Wangitshela ukuthi kune flop. And lelo flop lelo ukuthi umithise uMsipule. And uMsipule akafuna ukukhiphisisa.
He did in fact say that he wanted the Tshego killed or Msipule killed because she did not want to do an abortion. And I said I would find the people that would do it. But at the back of his mind, he later agreed or conceded to having, completed the scenario in his head that in fact he would do it. Malefane gave reasons as to why he went from being the person who was supposed to facilitate the sourcing of the person that was supposed to execute the crime to him agreeing to killing a heavily pregnant woman at the cost of 70,000 rands.
Ukuba greedy nokuba selfish nje nokuthanda imali.
I think Magafika la already she was gone.
In one of the meetings that they had prior to Tshegofatso's death, he says they agreed that she would be hung at Maritzburg Bridge, and what they would do is then write a suicide note and upload it onto her WhatsApp status to make it look like she committed suicide.
Mr. Shoba wathi uMsipule mele somhenga eMaritzburg bekune bridge lapha eMaritzburg. Okay, savumelana.
Obviously went to go look and scout the place where this was going to happen, where Tshegofatso would need to be hung. He saw that it was quite busy and it would be kind of impossible to hang somebody there. On the 29th of May, he then testifies about that important date, the 29th of May. He says he was instructed by Ntutuko to go to a McDonald's in the south of Joburg. When he got to the south of Joburg, he would pick up Tshegofatso.
The reason why the interview bekhona is bekumele after interview mina ngizopick up uMsipule Bengimele ngipick up uMiss Pule ngimyise to endlini kaShoba. Yilo lelanga lelo bekumele uMiss Pule kube ngalushonile.
Later, he decided to abandon the plan because Tshego did not pitch. It was about 6 days prior to Tshegofatso's murder. The 4th of June was the day the then 28-year-old mother-to-be would die. This, according to Malefane, was predetermined by Ntuthuko Shoba. The state's car tracking evidence places Shoba where his girlfriend lived.
Bengihleli nabangani bami, uMthokozisi, uBongane, noBhiko. Bekunabantu bebafaka isilingi endlini. Ngaphuma ngaya kuShoba. Bambonile abangani bami, bayibonile imoto. Kwazi beyipake ngaku drive through. Shoba wangitshela ukuthi uMiss Pule uzomvakashela today. Okay, Mr. Shoba wangitshela ukuthi today ilanga uMiss Pule kumele ashone ngalo namhlanje.
Tshegofatso would be coming on that day, later in the evening, to his house, and that he should now come and pick Tshegofatso Pule up and go and execute the crime. Later in the evening, he says he arrived at the Westlake complex at around 10 o'clock. He found Tshegofatso and Ntuthuko waiting for him just outside of the complex. He says Ntuthuko greeted him, and Tshegofatso had a conversation, and she was quite reluctant to even go into the car. And he said, well, I reassured her that get into the car, I'll take you home. He says he then drove. He drove with her to Newzroom. He drove to a dark area in Newzroom. He even details the last moments and how it actually happens. As he was driving, in fact, to Newzroom, he passes Midlands. So the road that he uses is Midlands. It goes along Midlands, where Tshegofatso used to live. And in the car, Tshegofatso, realizing that, in fact, you're now driving past my house, or the direction that leads to my house. Where are you going? He says, I then said, no, there's something that I need to pick up in Newzroom, but I'll bring you back. And Tshegofatso was like, okay. They then drove to Newzroom. He then gets to Newzroom. He describes how when he got to Newzroom, he already had the gun in his hand. He pulled her out of the car. He shot her. He then grabbed her and put her back in the car. Then he drove back using the same route that he used coming to Newzroom. He drove back and was busy looking for a place where he would hang her. He drove into Durban Deep. And you can imagine at night driving into a place that has no lights, that has possibly no people passing because it's really, really dark. Drove into the place, and he then hung Tshegofatso, and that's where he left her.
This tree refused to keep quiet. This tree refused to close its eyes. This tree worked like a camera and took pictures of the last moments of Tshegofatso.
He says the next time he bumped into Ntuthuko was a few days later. They bumped into each other at a cash build in Midlands. And they had a brief conversation where Ntuthuko assured him that he was now fixing the money because the job was done. He was fixing the money. And then, obviously, that was the last time they spoke. Obviously, he then went to Mpumalanga. And then he says that's where he disposed the gun that he used to shoot Tshegofatso. And then he came back and he was arrested.
Mr. Malefane, at one stage you've also testified that Mr. Shoba is scared of you. Is there any particular reason why you would have had apprehensions?
ngasho ukuthi maybe ile lifestyle bengiyiphila before sitshontshe imoto senza ama-house break siphila nje gangster.
So this is for the first time we got to really hear around the life that he led, because throughout the trial he didn't quite say. So how the state puts it is that Ntuthuko Shoba's registered cell phone number is an 076 number. But there is this number that Malepane alleges that they used to communicate with, to arrange all of this, which is an 081 number.
Another incident, my lord, it's the meeting at Cresta, where Mr. Shoba sends a WhatsApp to Ms. Pule that tomorrow I'll be meeting you at Cresta, my lord, at 3 o'clock. And interestingly enough, my lord, at around about that, during that same hour, the next day, my lord, that the disputed phone and his phone again is in that area, my lord. Is this a mere coincidence that his phone is in the same area each time with the disputed phone, my lord?
In fact, the court heard how on 7 occasions this was the case, where the registered number was in the same location with the unregistered number. So drawing a pattern around these base location where this disputed number that was said to be part of the plot, this is the disputed number that would be used to communicate during the plotting of the murder of Tshegofatso. So when the state rested its case, we saw the defense bring a Section 174 application, which is a discharge application in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act.
The state has closed its case after leading several witnesses in a bid to implicate the accused on the preferred charges. With regard to the count of murder, my lord, we submit that the state relies mainly on the evidence of Mr. Malepane, hereafter Malepane. My lord, in a bid to bolster the alternative charge of conspiracy to commit murder, the state sought to rely on the evidence of, amongst others, Mr. Malepane, expect cyber witnesses and or evidence based on communication received from a disputed phone.
I remember his lawyer saying that there is no credible evidence that he could have committed this crime. If anything, Muzgaise Malepane's evidence was tainted with a lot of untruths. He came across as someone who had an axe to grind with Malepane. He was angry. He did concede to have been angry himself. He lied in his initial statement. The defense rather saying that there wasn't any credibility to the evidence that he has brought before court, and therefore Ntuthuko Shoba needed to be discharged from these claims or from these allegations and these charges, which meant if the judge gives him or grants him this application or grants him an order of discharge, then he basically walks free without having to explain anything.
Mr. Shoba, I've considered the evidence that I've heard so far and the submissions that Mr. Makabela has made on your behalf and the submissions from Mr. Mohammed for the state. On the conspectus of all the facts, I am satisfied that there is a reasonable basis on which a court acting carefully might return a conviction on the charge of murder or conspiracy to murder.
In fact, he makes a very important or powerful statement saying that, in fact, even a serial killer sometimes tells the truth. His evidence was not so untarnished that it could be rejected by a court of law. However, it needed to be treated with caution, and by the end of the state's case, it was clear that there were certain things that Ntuthuko Shoba had to answer to. And one of the big questions was whether or not Ntuthuko Shoba would take the stand.
Good afternoon, sir. Please state your full names and surname. Ntuthuko Shoba.
He now gets to answer to this claim that the reason why he wanted Tshegofatso Pule dead was because he did not want his girlfriend to find out that he impregnated Tshegofatso.